Okay, well, my name is Lance Guilford and my colleague is Sinead Lynch. We are both reporters with the Scottish Government, and we've been appointed by Glasgow City Council to examine the proposed order for event day emergency routes and a parking zone in the vicinity of Celtic Park and the Emirates Arena. Now, you'll probably be aware that that is one of two orders which we are examining, the other one having virtually the same title, but in relation to Ibrox Stadium. So I'm going to chair today's pre-hearing meeting, and Mrs. Lynch will chair the other one tomorrow. But basically, we're jointly managing these pre-hearing meetings, so we will be contributing as appropriate. Now, we hope this won't happen very often, but there may be some slight pauses in the proceedings if something unexpected is raised that we feel we have to have a quick discussion on. We'll try to avoid that. We have discussed most things beforehand, so that may not be required, but just in case, just for you to be aware of that. And apart from, obviously, the people involved and site-specific differences, the orders are basically the same, and the same issues are tending to arise with respect to both orders. But today we're essentially concerned with the order for Celtic Park and the Emirates Arena. Now, you'll probably be aware, if you've looked at any of the documents on the website, that the order fits into an overall policy framework by the council relating to the management of parking within the city. This is set out in a number of committee reports on the website. Now, we've looked at that, and we do intend to examine that in the context, or examine the order in the context of the policy framework. But it'll only be insofar as it's relevant to determining whether this order should proceed or not. The order, obviously, as you're aware, follows complaints from the local community about parking availability and obstructive parking. And the council proposes to make the order to improve the amenity of the residential areas in the vicinity of the stadia and to encourage more sustainable transport to the stadia. There are other things, but these are probably the main aims behind the order. Now, there is a statutory process for the order. We're not going to go into that in any great detail, but it's a process which the council has to follow in making the order. And there's a set of regulations. They're actually on the website. We wouldn't normally say that you should read these as a matter of course, but these ones are quite short. And for anyone interested, it would be fairly easy to just go through what the council have to do in proposing this order. And we're actually in the middle of that process at the moment. So the orders, the regulations provide for appropriate consultation with specific organisations. That has been done. And then for the publication of the order, allowing a period of 21 days for objections to be made. So the draft order was actually published in 2018, so it's quite some time away, in accordance with the regulations, and following that, there were some 1,200 objections received. And a number of objectors have exercised their right to be heard by a person appointed by Scottish ministers, well, in this case, appointed by the council, although we work for the Scottish Government. And a number of objectors have exercised their right to be heard, and that's why we are here and why a hearing is going to be held, and then why we will be reporting to the council following that hearing. Now, it is for the council, as the promoter of the order, to justify the order through the hearing process. That's just the key point. But the statutory process does actually allow reporters to hear evidence from anyone with an interest in the subject matter of the order. That's set out in the regulations. And so we have, in the circumstances, with the agreement of the council, of course, decided to hear evidence from those who have made representations in support of the order, as well as those who've objected to the order. And basically, we consider that's required so that we can properly consider the matters raised within the objections and form balanced conclusions in our report to Glasgow City Council. So we generically refer to the examination of representations when we're looking at the whole, but that includes objections and support. And in addition to that, we've specifically requested both Police Scotland and the Strathclyde Partnership for Transport to attend the pre-hearing meeting, because they have management for transport and public order and health and safety in the vicinity of the order, and potentially have a contribution to make in the examination of matters raised within the representations. We'll pick that up a little bit more later on. Okay, one thing that's very important and we will stick to rigidly is that there will be no discussion about the merits of the case today. We really need to concentrate on the procedures for the hearing. We have to be strict about that. We decided that we needed this pre-hearing meeting simply because of the complexity of these particular cases and the hearing process in that respect. And the pre-hearing meeting is essentially for those people who've made representations through the statutory process and who intend to participate in the hearing. Someone asked about this recently, and it does cover those who are not sure. It's quite reasonable for people after this meeting to decide that after all they don't wish to participate in the hearing, but just to rely on written submissions. And if you wish to do that, that's absolutely fine. And an additional point we would make here is that for those who do rely on written submissions, there is a sort of parallel procedure, which is that if we think that we need more information on anything raised in those submissions, we may actually write out to people, and that would generally be the party that made the representation and the council, but it may involve others as well. But that's a sort of parallel process to the hearing process itself. Okay, well, you'll be aware that we sent a letter out on the 7th of February to all those who made representations in relation to the order. Now, just at this point, we have to hold our hands up a bit here and say and apologise for confusion which arose from the use of a ticket mechanism which we set up to enable people who'd made representations to attend the pre-hearing meeting to register. It was actually accessed quickly by a large number of people, of other people, probably on both sides of the argument. And we actually had to abandon the process because it had the effect of actually excluding people who had made representations and who intended to participate in the hearing. We didn't expect that to happen, but it did, and that was an error on our part, so we're sorry about that. We should have just relied entirely on the responses to the letter, which is what we reverted to, but despite the confusion, we are now satisfied that any potential prejudice has been avoided. Nevertheless, of course, this pre-hearing meeting is still being held in public, and we've retained provision for people who have not made representation to be able to attend, subject to the capacity of the venue. And by asking people to write in to the programme officer team to explain their interest in attending the meeting. Some people have done that and are here this evening. The hearing itself will of course be held in public, and provision will be made for anyone with an interest in the subject matter to attend that. Again, though, there may be logistical issues about that, and we will further discuss that under agenda item 5. Anything else?
No, not at this time.
Okay, so we had in mind that we needed to try and get through the introduction by about 7:30, so there's about 10 minutes or so. If anyone has any queries at this stage. There's plenty to get through otherwise, but if anyone has any queries about what I've just said.
The lady
yes, the
in the
lady.
Green cardigan.
Sorry, we have to. We have to get used to this. There's going to be a little bit of a pause just while we get a microphone to you.
Thanks. Could you just tell us how that error has been remedied so that we know that everyone who's either made a representation or wanted to be here is actually able to be here and didn't
yes, of
see
course.
that the system had no more tickets left and then fail to try again?
Are you someone who made a representation?
Yes.
Yes. Well, basically what we did, we abandoned the process of the tickets and we wrote out to people, say, sorry, the tickets won't let you in here. And we then we confirmed with people who'd made representations, what we said in the letter actually was that you write into the programme officers to say if you wish to attend the pre-hearing meeting. And so we just confirmed that. And so as far as we know, everyone who wished to attend is able to do so. We left that provision available. I should mention, and we'll pick this right at the end, that there will be a period where people who are not here can also make comments when they see the note of the meeting. And we may not completely finish the business anyway on the participation stuff. Is that helpful? I mean, I honestly don't think that anyone will now have been prejudiced, but they would have been if we hadn't taken action. Anyone else?
Okay.
We've got 10 minutes, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to.
Yep.
Oh, we're back. Okay. If not, we'll just move on. I think one thing that I would just say is that we're quite keen to ensure, and we're pleased that it is so far, that this meeting is undertaken. It'll have to be in a structured way, but also in a friendly and informal manner. We don't want anyone to be intimidated by this process, even though there is a statutory basis. And we appreciate the controversial nature of the subject matter. And a hearing tends to be, and to some extent, an adversarial process. But anyway, that's just something that we will try to engender as we go along. So please, if anyone wants to contribute at any time, please do so. Okay, is everyone happy that we move on to item 2 then? Okay, well the next 2 items should be very brief. The second one is just covers what's in the explanatory note really about the content of the order. It's very much a summary. It provides the background to the order and what it contains. The order is quite long because it has schedules and it refers to all the streets relevant to the particular type of restriction. But the type of restrictions are all set out in the explanatory note. And they're also on the website in documents. And they're accompanied by maps, quite detailed maps. There's an overview map which shows everything. And then there's a series of maps which shows the areas that are affected by the order and where the restrictions apply. However, we think that there will need to be time set aside at the beginning of the hearing for the council representatives to explain the content of the order for people, just with reference to the maps. And I think those could be displayed on exhibition boards at the hearing, just so that everyone is fully aware. I appreciate that the maps are quite detailed. I think we have some questions on some of the stuff there, so we think that'll be necessary. So we're going to do that at the beginning. Well, that's actually all we have, unless you have anything about that. So, but if you wish to comment,
Yep,
yes,
we'll have
of course.
a question, Alan, here at the front.
Wait for the microphone, yeah. He's coming as quickly as he can.
Jacqueline Harris here on behalf of Celtic. I'm conscious that this is not the place to raise issues on the merits of the order, but given that we're looking at procedure, I think the point that I'm about to make should be made now in fairness, because it is something that we will be asking should be accommodated in the procedure which is to be adopted. And that is an issue in relation to the procedure that has been adopted in respect of the promotion of the order.
Right.
In our submission, that hasn't followed as it ought to, and the notification procedure is not as it should have been. And we do have an issue in that. I'm happy to describe that issue now, if that would be of assistance. I can summarise it, and then you can tell me whether you want more detail, or we can deal with it later. But it seemed in fairness I ought to raise it at this stage.
Okay, well, first of all, have you discussed that with the council?
No, we haven't, no.
Because I would have hoped that if an issue had arisen like that, that it would have been discussed with the council.
Well, you will appreciate that in preparation for this meeting, there has been a review of the papers that are available, and it's arising from that review.
Okay.
So it hasn't been raised in representations to date?
It hasn't, no, because this is an issue that will relate to the competence of the order and the procedure that's been adopted.
Okay. It probably is for the hearing itself, because if there are any legal submissions about the orders, they need to be taken into account during the hearing. But if you would like to briefly explain what the issue is, then the council knows about it and could briefly respond.
I'm very happy to do that, and I'm also happy to discuss with the council separate from this
well, I think that would be very helpful.
That might be more efficient, because as matters stand, what we would be suggesting is that this is a matter that ought best be dealt with by a preliminary hearing on this preliminary issue, because it would seem not to be sensible to have a hearing on the order as proposed if in fact there is an underlying challenge to that order in the process that has been adopted. And it would seem to be more effective and efficient to have that issue resolved first. I'll summarise the point as best I can. Yes, if you can,
because actually we would quite like to know what it is as well.
It's probably better done with the material in front of us, which is not possible in the current environment. But basically, when the, as you've referred to, the regulations specify the process that ought to be followed in relation to consultation and notification. And at the point of notification, the notice both publicised in the press and also notified to consultees requires to contain certain levels of information, and also to refer to the order, which is the order proposed at that point.
Is this the press notice that you're talking?
Yes, and
the notices on the...
to consultees, which requires to be in the same terms. And if you recall, that notice requires also to refer to the order and to allow for inspection of that order. That happened in 2018,
Yes.
and at that stage, the order, as then drafted and proposed by the council had material blanks and gaps in the terms of the order. The schedules that were attached, in fact, practically contained no content. There was no specification of the streets to which the order related. There was some reference to some control measures, but not to which street they related to. There was also no specification of the period that the order would apply, the hours of operation. And that, in fact, remains an absence from the order. There were maps available, as you've referred to, but those maps do not allow, on examination, the information in terms of the control measures and how they apply to the various streets within the order. You can't reconcile the two, and that in fact remains the case. But as far as we're aware, it was only as recently as February, so in the last month, that the specification of the schedules in the order, which form the content of the order, were in fact made available. So the order that has been notified is not complete.
Can I just, right, there's one thing that we noticed when we were provided with a copy of the order, and that is that the schedules were not complete in terms of, but we assumed that that was just because that was a mistake and that it had been sent out in an incomplete form. We assumed that the order had actually been complete when it was publicised.
Not so far as we are aware as Celtic, and my
So you're telling me that what we saw in terms of the schedules
is what there was.
It was actually how it was published?
Yes.
Okay, well...
Well, bear in mind that the order itself is not publicised. It's a notice of the order,
yes.
but the order has
but
to
the
be
order's
available
for inspection,
yes.
That's the point.
Yes.
So what you're saying is, your contention is that when people went to see the order, it was incomplete?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think we need a council response on that.
This is something the council would want to investigate and respond to in detail. As you noted, that this is something that could have been raised in advance of tonight's hearing, and if we had been given sufficient notice, then we would have been able to give a definitive answer tonight. However, I think it's important that we fully understand the challenge which has been made, and interrogate the relevant documents which were available at the relevant time.
Okay, well, I'm taking this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm taking this on behalf of Celtic Football Club as a notice of an intention to challenge on this basis. As I said, it would be something that would be raised at the hearing itself, but I agree that it would be better for it to be investigated beforehand. I would hope that there could be discussion between those representing the football club and those representing the council, and to keep us advised of the progress of that. And then at the beginning of the hearing, we would expect to be able to address that issue.
I'm happy to undertake.
Sorry, you get used to this.
Be louder.
I know.
I'm happy to undertake to inform the council in detail of the points that we have raised to confirm that. Our invitation to the council will be to repeat the notification procedure, and that obviously will impact on the process that follows from here on in, because as matters stand, the responses to that order are not responses to the order currently being proposed. So if there is not a re-notification of the order as currently proposed, then we would be challenging the content of the order placed before the hearing, because that order, which is now before you, sir, is not the order on which parties have been notified or asked to comment.
All right, well, that is a procedural matter, and it's something that we can investigate and hopefully resolve at the hearing, and it's useful to have notification now, at least it's not being raised at the hearing itself, and so there's an opportunity. Is there some sort of timescale or date that we can have about when this could be discussed and when we could get something in about it? Because we've still got to talk about the timescale and the date for the hearing itself, and all the procedures that lead up to that.
I'm happy to agree that we will confirm to the Council the points that we have raised this evening within 14 days of this hearing.
Okay, that would be the 24th of March.
And the Council is happy to respond within 7 days.
So within 7 days, that would take us to the 31st of March. So is everybody clear in the room what has just happened? I see there's a lady here with a question just behind you, Alan.
Sorry, can I just have it clarified? Is Glasgow City Council saying that they weren't aware that it wasn't complete? Or they hadn't noticed it wasn't complete?
I think what they're saying is that they wish to investigate it. Yes. They can't answer the point just at the moment as it's been raised, but they wish to have the opportunity to investigate it. And obviously Celtic Football Club will provide details of the issue that is being contested, and the council will respond to that.
Okay. Those responses will be publicly available for all parties to see. So I think those dates would be the 24th and the 31st of March.
I think, in fact, if we can probably revisit this when we come to the preparation of statements, etc., for the hearing, because there's going to be a time scale for that, and this will need to be fitted into that. And we'll have to leave it open as to what action is going to be taken, and that will have to be actually finalised at the hearing. But obviously, we would like to have as clear as possible a view from both the football club and the council of what your position is, respectively, so that we can form a judgment about it.
So this may be a matter that is better revisited once the submissions between Celtic and the Council have been completed. But I would want to note that the utility of proceeding with a full hearing on all issues, while this point remains outstanding, would, in our view, be questionable, standing the amount of complexity and other issues that need to be addressed if, in fact, there is a preliminary matter which might render that redundant.
Okay, well, is that not going back to the point that I made that we need to discuss this when we get to the provision of statements and so forth, and the date for the hearing?
To proceed
and
on that
we'll take
basis.
that into account, so that we've got to try and make sure that everyone is content with the process that is being adopted here. So let's just revisit that when we get to, that'll be item 6, won't it, agenda item 6. Is the council happy with that? Yes. We do that? Okay. Anything else?
Yep.
Yes.
Gentleman here.
I am just simply representing myself as a season ticket holder. I'm a bit concerned. I'm a bit concerned. Your initial preamble clearly indicated, as we all know, that this order's been lying for the best part of 2 years, and that was obvious from the outset. This concern of mine has now been compounded by the fact that the council is unaware of obviously glaring errors in the document, and secondly, on your own part as reporters, you, to use your own words, you assumed it was an error or a mistake made in the paperwork. Surely the importance of this whole procedure is dependent upon fact, and if there's no fact or evidence that can be substantiated, then I would suggest that we've got some serious problems before we even get any further.
You're referring to the apology that I gave?
Yes.
Now, the apology that I gave was just for one specific thing which we did wrong, which was to set up a ticketing system.
No. You said, following the council submission, that you looked at the papers, and when Miss Harris pointed out to you that there were omissions, you said you assumed that there were errors, when in fact they did not exist.
No, I was just trying to clarify the situation with respect to the actual orders, and if the orders, we obviously at this stage don't know the position in terms of what is being claimed, that the orders were incomplete when they were on public deposit. That's something that we're going to investigate.
But surely in order to pursue the order to its final outcome, you need to be aware of everything, and even at this pre-hearing, you should be aware of the background to it.
That's what we're trying to do, sir. That's what we're actually trying to do here. A point of procedure has been raised on behalf of Celtic Football Club, which the council is going to respond to, and we're going to see if we get an agreement on the issue before the actual hearing. And at the hearing, we will need to identify the position, and we will have to form a judgment about that. I'm satisfied that the process is in hand, and no one is going to be prejudiced by this because it will be addressed at the hearing. So I would give you that assurance if that helps. Anything else? You want anything else?
Yeah.
Okay, so we move on to item 3. So this is also covered in the explanatory note, and what we've done there is to try to give a summary of what the representations are all about. Clearly, the vast majority of the objections are to the principle of the order, and we think these can be split into about 10 or so key issues for examination at the hearing. These are set out in the bullet points in paragraph 3.3. They might not exactly appear like that on the agenda for the hearing, but those are the basic issues that we think have been raised in the representations. There's four bullet points after the first two, which are all transport related, and these could probably be considered as subheadings under a single heading of transport. And there's also a possible subheading under the first bullet point relating to the permit system. That's been raised in relation to the Ibrox order by people making representations rather than this one, but the issue would obviously apply to both orders. So that's just a summary of the position. Now then, there are several key site-specific issues of objection which are listed in paragraph 3.4. Now those don't cover everything. We have been through the representations, and so we're aware of the issues raised, but individual site-specific objections will be dealt with, but they may not be in that summary. What we've done is picked out issues which appear to have multiple representations related to them. There may also, a lot of these may end up being considered through written submissions, so they may not even arise at the hearing. And that will become clearer as we approach the hearing and you see all the statements and we have the agendas and so forth. I would make one point that we've noted, in fact it's in the report dealing with the Council's approval to pursue the order. There are only, I think, 6 objections which relate to unloading and loading. And those are specific individual site inspections which will be examined on their own merits, but maybe not necessarily through the hearing. Now, we have certainly recognised that it would be a big task to read through all of the representations on the website. And so we have done what we think is a fairly comprehensive review of the representations. And we've prepared a summary of those, which hopefully will help you get a flavour for all the issues that we're going to have to examine, both at the hearing and in written submissions. And we have prepared a schedule grouping similar representations together. This is early stages for this. It's going to be an ongoing matter, and that will be developed, and particularly for the objections in principle to the order, as groups of parties working together becomes clear. Okay, more on that under agenda item 5. So hopefully that helps give some background to what this hearing is all about. Again, any queries anyone has in relation to what we've put in that section? All right, happy to move on? Okay, the next item just deals with the format of the hearing. And section 4 of the explanatory note sets out the main points in relation to this. And it relates to what I said earlier, although this has to be a structured discussion because we're dealing with a statutory process. The hearing will be informal, and the intention is to have a situation where people feel that they can make a contribution at the hearing without feeling intimidated by a rigid process. And there will be an agenda that will issue before the hearing takes place. That will be based on the key topics which we need to examine, and that goes back to what we've just discussed in agenda item 3. It will to some extent depend on the content also of the hearing statements, but we still think that they will generally be based on those bullet points, with an introduction, as I said earlier, which will hopefully help to explain the order, what its content is, and look at the maps. And then we think also followed by a strategic session, a short one, but just looking at the order in the context of the Council's overall policy approach to parking management in relation to the documents that are on the website. We will certainly examine all of the site-specific objections under the relevant heading. We'll either do that under the relevant subject heading or at the end. We intend to be taking evidence on behalf of the Council, on behalf of Celtic Football Club, Police Scotland, SPT, and other objectors and supporters. And that will all be done on a topic-by-topic basis. At least that is the intention. We will be likely to ask detailed questions of parties giving evidence, but it's an information gathering exercise rather than cross-examination. We won't be involving ourselves in that. Now, just in terms of the informality and what I hope will be a relatively friendly approach to this, even though there'll be points of disagreement and possibly legal submissions and things that we have to sort out. So it's inevitably an adversarial element to the discussion. And we recognise that all parties will wish to present their evidence and argue their case in a manner which is advantageous to their position. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we will manage that position and make judgments as appropriate. But we do ask everyone in the process to respect other points of view and not to try to seek an unfair advantage by undermining the process we have set out. An example of this would be bringing in late evidence, which would be a surprise to other parties. We want to try and avoid that, make sure that the parties who submit statements comprehensively include all the necessary information so that we can have a structured discussion at the hearing. There is a positive note that we have detected, despite the adversarial nature of this and the strong views that there are on both sides. And that is that there is some common ground in some of these matters, some more than others. For example, many objectors express sympathy for residents who are affected by the scale of parking on residential streets on match days, and particularly inconsiderate parking, for example, blocking driveways. That is recognised in many of the objections, probably not to the extent that they want the order to proceed, though. But on the other hand, some residents have also expressed sympathy for those who visit the stadia and who park considerately on residential streets. So there is some common ground, and we'll pick that up a little bit later as well. And there's certainly nothing to prevent a movement in position by either side of the argument as the hearing progresses. In major cases, things do develop and things do change. And there's certainly nothing in the statutory process which requires a do-or-die adversarial approach to be maintained. And so we'll be looking to engender, and we think that will be helpful for those on both sides of the argument, from visitors to the stadia and also people living in the area, to try to make sure that you get all your points across and that we will be able to consider those. We need to get the best evidence to be able to make an appropriate judgment and to advise the council. And that obviously includes when we're discussing legal submissions about the order, and they may happen from time to time, as we've had one that we have to deal with already. That's all I have to say about that. Anything else? So, any comments, please? Any questions?
Gentleman in the middle.
There you go.
I'm speaking as a season ticket holder myself, and I drive to every game. I've never, ever parked in front of somebody's driveway. Never. It's just not done. And surely, even out with match days, if somebody parks in front of your driveway, the police should take charge of it.
This is very much an issue that we will be examining at the hearing. It's one of the subjects, one of the bullet points, which is the issue of inconsiderate parking. There's obviously views on both sides in relation to that, and we will be looking at all of that before forming any conclusions and making any recommendations to the council. And so that is an issue. But all I was trying to say earlier is that although there are two sides to this argument and some of it is very strongly felt, there is common ground. We have detected some common ground. So all of that will be addressed at the hearing. So, sir, you will have every opportunity to make all the points that you want to make about that. And we're going to discuss that, how we do that shortly. But rest assured you'll be able to do that. Yes?
Hi, good evening. Gordon McGavin. I'm representing the NHS services within the area because there's a dentist, a doctor's and a pharmacy practice. Now, we provide services to the local population. I see noted in the participation of the hearing that Glasgow City Council and Celtic Football Club will be participating. Has the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde been informed of this through the council? And do we have specific representation as well? Because that's very important for the local services,
right,
especially disabled people, etc.
I don't think we're aware of any representation from NHS services. But I mean, is the council aware that there is anything?
Could the council
Are you
there...
saying that there is a representation lodged?
Well, we are representing the practice owners, the pharmacy and the doctors. However, we are governed by, in essence, Greater Glasgow Health Board.
Okay, what I'm really trying to get at is, do you know if, when this was publicised, if there was a representation submitted?
No.
Well, obviously then that's not been done through the statutory process. I mean, I'm not sure how this will fit in to the hearing process. We've got another a bit to say later on when we're talking about participation, about involvement of people who haven't submitted representations. We have to be very careful about that because there's a statutory process. It's been publicised. People have submitted, in terms of the regulations, it's really objections, but some people have also submitted letters of support. So that's the material that's really being put before the hearing, because people have a right to be heard at the hearing or to have their written submissions considered. And that's what we're doing. And I mentioned earlier the number of objections that had been, and so we're looking at all of those. And so it may be that the points that you NHS services wish to make is covered in that. I think the difficulty we would have is if there is a new issue that's raised that isn't actually within the submission.
It wouldn't, in essence, it wouldn't be a new issue. Right. It would be representing the three healthcare providers within Springfield Road.
Okay, can we come back to that one when we're talking about the participation, because in fact we're just about at that, aren't we? Yep. So we'll come to that very shortly, and we'll try and pick that up and see how we can fit that in. Okay.
Any other questions on the format of the hearing? No. Okay.
Yeah. Are you just swatting a fly, or? Okay. So, are we happy to move on to 5?
Yep.
Because this is probably the meat of the discussion, to be honest. And now we hope to finalise as much as possible today in terms of this, at least on the guidelines for participation. But we recognise that there's going to be unfinished business, which will probably need to be followed, and we'll need to discuss how we're going to do that. I think we're pretty clear that there will be a period following this pre-hearing meeting within which people can form groups for the purpose of submitting evidence to the hearing. And we'll keep the schedule of objections updated according to that. I also say that should you find after this pre-hearing meeting, if you feel that you'd be satisfied with us looking at your written submission, then there's no requirement for you to continue to take part in the hearing. You aren't obliged to do so, nor are you obliged to make additional written submissions, although we've provided for that to be done for those who wish to do so. But you can certainly rely on your original objection. Okay, we're going to try and do this in a logical order. I'm not sure that we're 100% clear how this is going to go yet, but we'll see. We'll see how we progress. Now, the thing we do have to say at this point is those who intend to participate in the hearing will have to lose any anonymity in terms of their name and any organisations they represent. Just as in all the representations that have been put on the website, personal information, personal details, financial details, these things will have been redacted, and those will still not be made public in the hearing. But one thing that we will have to do with all those participating is to disclose the names of people, and if you represent any organisation, have to disclose that as well. Now, we're going to maybe mention names as we progress through that. So I'm saying that now. If anyone wants to object to that, now is the time to do it, or forever hold your peace, as they say, because this is being webcast. So once names and organisations have been disclosed, they're in the public domain. But we have to do that if you wish to participate. So I'm assuming that all those who've said that they wish to participate in the hearing are happy for their names and their organisations to be disclosed. Can I just make sure that no one objects to that? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, well, we're going to start with the council. We have a note of, I'll just read these out, it'll probably be easier, and you can correct me if there's anything wrong. The council has external legal advisors, Mr. Peter Ferguson, who's a partner with Harper MacLeod, and Ms. Rosalind MacDonald, who is a senior solicitor, and you'll be acting for the council at the hearing. Yes. Yeah. And then the officers who will be giving evidence on behalf of the council, Mr. Kevin Hamilton, who is the head of Roads, Neighbourhoods and Sustainability. Maybe if you could just so that we know. Okay. And Mr. Andrew Beglin, who is Assistant Group Manager Parking Services in Neighbourhoods and Sustainability. And Helen Morrison, Engineering Officer, Neighbourhoods and Sustainability. Okay. And Martin McColgan, Legal Manager, Chief Executive Department. Thank you. Okay, so that is the council's team.
Mr.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
The council's team is likely to be supplemented by...
Sorry.
There we go.
Thanks. The council's team is likely to be supplemented at the hearing session by someone from policy and strategy, someone from the equalities impacts team.
Sorry, equalities and?
Equalities impacts, and someone dealing with air quality.
Right, okay.
But the precise identities have still to be determined.
Okay, well, thank you for that. It's useful to know that. So that'll be essentially possibly another three witnesses on behalf of up to three. Yes, okay. Thank you for that. That's helpful. So that's the council's team. And on behalf of Celtic Football Club, we have Jacqueline Harris, who is, and Stephen Blaine, Pinsent Mason, acting on behalf of Celtic Football Club, and Michael Nicholson and John Paul Taylor from the football club. I assume you'll be giving evidence at certain points throughout the hearing. Yes?
Malcolm, come over that.
Yes, sir, if it would help, I can run through the witnesses that we, or the support that we intend to have available at the hearing.
Yes, that would be helpful.
There will be external traffic consultants. SWACO have been appointed to assist. Neil Heggie and Claire Carr, who are consultants there, will be available to the hearing.
These are traffic consultants?
They are, yes.
Traffic consultants, right.
From Celtic, there will be a senior club official who will be able to address various of the issues addressed in the representations by Celtic on the impact of the order.
Right.
There will also be a senior officer who can speak to current operations and safety matters, and a support liaison officer who will be able to address matters relating to the support and fan base, the demographic, and the transport modes currently deployed, and the impact of the order. That's as we currently envisage the representation. We would that may be added to in terms of the issues that emerge from the football club. There will also be an external economist in relation to the economic impact.
Okay. That's, you missed somebody?
Yeah, the only other point, and I think we'll probably come on to it, Celtic are pleased that the reporters have invited input from SPT, but we note that they in turn have suggested that there would be need for additional input in relation to some of the public transport issues. We are supportive of that being explored with those other agencies, but depending on the outcome, we may also wish to bring a witness in relation to public transport matters.
Okay. Right, that's helpful. I'm going to come on to Police Scotland and SBT's involvement shortly, so I think that'll fit in with what you've just said. We're just trying to get an outline at this stage, just so that we know the key players for the parties who are going to be giving evidence at the hearing. So we've got the councils, we've got Celtic football clubs, and that's fine in respect of knowing these other areas. That's very helpful, and hopefully when statements are prepared at that point you'll be able to indicate who it might be, because obviously it would be helpful to know before the hearing. You don't need to know just yet, but before the hearing if possible. Okay, so does that complete that?
Yes, it does, sir.
You can have the microphone back now. Okay. Right, I have one question for the football club though, just at this stage. As you'll be aware that we're trying to obtain evidence in the most efficient way so that we've got the best evidence that we can form conclusions on. And so that's why we're looking at groups. And I just wondered to what extent the football club felt that it would be able to represent the views of supporters. I mean, clearly we're going to go on and I'm going to identify people who want to be involved and possible groups. But there obviously is, I mean, we've obviously read the submission from Celtic Football Club. There are a lot of issues raised, and many of them are also raised by supporters. And so you've obviously indicated from what you've just said, there'll be people there, experts and so forth, giving detailed evidence. And so it might be helpful, I'm not sure where we can go with this today, it might need further development, but it might be possible for the club to represent supporters, and that might save a lot of supporters feeling that they need to attend or take part in the hearing.
Well, sir, clearly Celtic are keen to represent their interests, and those interests are significantly aligned, no doubt, with their support. But they would not want to restrict the opportunity of their supporters to represent their own experience in relation to the impact of the order. The club has information that it will make available to the hearing as best it can in relation to that impact, but it will not have all of the individual experiences that the people who have submitted representations in this process have been keen to make. So our representations will do what they can, and they will advance the position as best it can, but it will not substitute for the position of all of the support who have been very keen to express the impact that this order will have in this process, and I think will no doubt continue to want to do that.
Okay. Yes, I fully accept that. We've already indicated that anyone who wishes to give evidence at the hearing will be able to do that. We're just trying to set it up in as efficient an efficient way, so that we can get evidence in a structured manner. And so I'm just raising that so that supporters are aware that you are going to be giving detailed evidence on a lot of issues, and so they might take
it
some
may be
comfort
something
in
that can be addressed in the timetable to ensure that the material that is going to be available at the hearing will be available to those who want to express a view, so that they can ascertain whether that view is being properly represented.
Yes, well, we've got to come to the issue of who's going to prepare statements and how they're going to be circulated and so forth, so we will do that. Yes.
Hi, my name's Philip Doherty. I'm a Celtic supporter, and I've got a season ticket for the past 20 years, and I've travelled to Celtic Park and to other venues, and I think it's very important that you understand the experiences of supporters trying to get there in a time and in a safe manner, and leave the park as well. My experience has been pretty bad in the public transport system structure and the management, both of Police Scotland and several other institutions. It's been very detrimental, and I think Celtic Park have done their utmost. And you need to understand our frustrations as travelling public.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to come to everyone just very shortly to seek how you wish to contribute, so I'll do that in a minute. Okay, if you want to comment just now, but I will be coming to you very shortly.
Yeah, you're asking for structure from Celtic supporters. We have a liaison officer, so maybe John Paul would like to take some of that on board.
Right, I'll come back to you on that just in a very short time, and that's exactly the sort of thing that we're looking for. But before doing that, I'm just trying to go through this in a logical order to identify who's going to take part in the hearing. So we now have Police Scotland and Chief Inspector Michael Duddy. You're a local area commander. You're over there. Sorry. And you'll obviously be attending the hearing on behalf of Police Scotland. And then for SPT.
Sorry.
SPT? SPT.
Sorry, can I just...
Sorry?
Just so everyone's aware, obviously Police Scotland hasn't been as proactive and involved in this process as the Council and Celtic Football Club. As I sit here, I'm the local area commander for London Road for policing Glasgow East, business as usual. It may well be a need for Police Scotland to also bring someone who's more experienced and skilled in terms of the actual event that takes place at Celtic Park, which obviously during any fixture or indeed at the Emirates, it sits as a separate entity, so it may well be another colleague with me.
Right. Okay. That will be absolutely fine. I'm going to just ask a few questions in a moment in relation to both Police Scotland's and SPT's involvement. But can I just identify with SPT, Gordon Dixon? Mr. Dixon, and you're head of bus strategy and delivery. And Mr. Donald Booth, you're the bus development manager. So it's a lot about buses. Okay, just in relation to Police Scotland and SPT, I wanted to just develop this a little bit because you both have a specific role in providing expert advice at this hearing. You haven't made representations, but you're appearing because we've asked you to appear, because we think that you will have an important contribution to make. That's how we see the thing at the moment. Now, I'm conscious that SPT has sent a response just in the last couple of days, and I would say that we're very happy with the stated remit of SPT. I've asked the programme officers to put that on their website, so I think it probably is on by now for people to see. And essentially, that is to provide strategic advice on how the public transport system relates to the orders. I think that's possibly, is that a reasonable summary? I would say very clearly that what we're not doing is examining the effectiveness or otherwise of the public transport system. We're only looking at the ability of the public transport system to accommodate people who might be dissuaded from travelling by private car by the order, and to what extent any existing or improved public transport might therefore be a determining factor as to whether or not the order should proceed. So it's all related to the order. Everyone needs to be aware of that. If you have complaints about public transport or the way the police operate, that isn't what we're looking for, and we won't be taking evidence on that. What we're looking for is relating things specifically to the order, and just to make sure that everyone is aware of how this is going to go. Now, the other thing is, with SPT, I'm not sure to what extent you can provide evidence about the rail network and bus services. I think you indicated in the response that there are commercial bus operators and that we might need information from them about the demands on their services that might result from the orders. Right, so that's what we've got to look at. And as far as the rail network is concerned, it's ScotRail. I think you have a strategic overview of the rail, yes, so that you cover something about that and how the orders might affect it. Now, we did actually ask ScotRail, but they declined to attend the pre-hearing meeting. They didn't think it was necessary, but they did offer to provide further information if requested to do so. So there are one of two things we can do here. We can go back to them and ask if it would be a good idea that they did give some evidence, and we'll have to see how that goes. But we have the opportunity to contact them and ask for information, and that may not become known until we're actually in the hearing process and we go through the process. We're hoping that SPT will be able to provide a lot of the input that we need to consider the order. But I think the point I'm making is, if necessary, we can go back to either ScotRail or the bus operators and either ask them to attend or to get information, further information that we can consider. And the same principle applies with Police Scotland as well. I mean, we're not looking into the operations of Police Scotland, and I give you an assurance on that, that we won't be taking evidence on that. But what it will be is to look at where the police operations may have an effect or may be affected by the order. And so that's to do with when the order comes into operation, and how it affects the operations of Police Scotland, or how Police Scotland can work with the order. So that's the sort of thing that we'd be looking at. Does either SPT or Police Scotland want to say anything more about that at this stage, or are you basically happy with the way I'm approaching this?
Yeah, thank you. Gordon Dixon from SPT. Yes, and I think certainly the point that the vast majority of bus services in and around Celtic Park are operated on a commercial basis, and First Glasgow being the main operator in that area. So I think they're absolutely key to part of that discussion. Second, just a point of clarification in regards to the rail network. So the franchise is led by Transport Scotland, who have strategic direction over the rail network, and that's operated by a belly of ScotRail, as you've alluded to. So again, another key player in terms of perhaps answering some of the questions within their planning or future plans. Certainly SPT will endeavour to provide as much information as may be required by yourselves. Thank you.
Okay. Have you had a chance to have a look at the summary of issues raised on the website at all for the order?
Yes.
So I think I'd be looking for some, maybe some guidance from you about whether or not you feel we should ask bus operators to attend or ScotRail to attend, and we can go back to them. We haven't done so yet because we weren't sure how this was going to go. But we could go to them and ask for them to assist at the hearing, or we could just ask for further information. Do you have a view on that?
I think that's something you might wish to give further consideration to.
Okay.
I think we've alluded to in our original submission in terms of our own roles and responsibilities and those that sit with our organisation.
Okay. I don't know whether the football club has any view on that, because you did mention that you were keen to you were keen to get evidence from the transport operators and from Police Scotland.
Well, I think it is relevant to the issues before the hearing. We would have expected this to be a matter that the council would have explored, given that the order is predicated on an assumption that there will be public transport available for those who could not park in the area. So it seems to us an area that ought to be explored alongside the order and therefore at the hearing.
Okay. In relation to the bus companies, is it a situation where SPT could get them on board in terms of the evidence you give? In other words, they support you, or are you saying that we should approach them directly?
I think it would depend on the nature of the information that you might seek from us or others. In terms of current service provision, we've got a very good awareness and understanding of the data behind that in terms of the service registrations, frequencies, coverage, destinations, etc. In terms of the other, the capacity or viability of these routes, that would be for the firms themselves to respond upon. Thank you.
Okay. So that's just something that I'm just trying to get as much guidance as we can in terms of how you feel that we should go in relation to this. Sorry, yes, there's a few contributions.
Actually, this lady here is in the blue.
Yeah.
I'll come to you in a moment. Sorry.
Yeah.
That order.
Thanks, yeah. I've read most of the PDF documents on the website, just copies of the objections and thoughts of the public and etc. I couldn't see anything from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. It might have been I just didn't see it, or I glanced over that certain copy of the email from them, but I just wondered whether that rang a bell, if they had been in touch about this.
We did send a letter to them as well to ask them if they wished to attend. We haven't had a response on that. Oh,
Yay!
Here they are.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Winter from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service at City of Glasgow. We have in place our standard operating procedures for any incident in Celtic Park, and we work very closely with Police Scotland in terms of the management of our appliances through the city with any major sporting impact it's having, whether it's at Celtic Park or Ibrox. We work very much and closely with police with that. We have an appliance at the stadium, and we would look at the traffic management in place to make sure that our appliances get to any emergency response within the vicinity.
Okay, well, can I ask then, do you feel it would be a good idea for you to come to the hearing and give evidence?
Yes, I was expecting that would be the case, yes.
Okay, well, if we can include your name, Mr. Winter, would it be you or...?
It would probably be Area Commander Roddy Keith who will be attending that, and along with myself.
Can I just say in response to that, is there interest from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service about incidents out with Celtic Park? I know you said you've got a really good facility based at the stadium, of course, if the worst should happen there. But I just wondered whether there was any plans from you guys if there was perhaps an incident in the streets where there's, at the moment, sometimes double parking on a road, and whether there would be space for a fire engine to get down, for example. That's just, just want to make sure there's equal sides from that. So thanks.
Yep. Well, the traffic management plans do go into our local stations. We have 11 stations situated across the city centre of Glasgow, and usually on major events over the weekend we have a full response in every one of our stations. So Police Scotland communicate any traffic management systems that are in place that may have an impact on our fire appliances within the immediate vicinity of any sports grounds. And we work very much with Police Scotland in the event, not just within an incident within the stadium, but also out with the stadium. But it's very much a business as usual case with the appliances positioned at the stations at Palmadie, in the Carlton area, and also at Clydesmill. They are the stations that are virtually round about the vicinity of the stadium, and it's very much business as usual, but we do have all the necessary information in relation to road closures, etc., in order that we can position appliances as appropriate.
I think this is something, because we're getting into matters for the hearing really now, but this is something you can ask and we can get a response. But it's useful at least to know all the sort of areas that we're going to be looking at the hearing, because the key players we will want to we'll ask to submit statements, and I'm sure you'd be happy to do that before the hearing. So a lot of things will be picked up, and by the time we get to the hearing, we'll have a clearer idea of what we're going to discuss. Yes.
There's just one thing about if this comes into place, the people that are going to be displaced there going to Celtic Park, those parking places are going to move elsewhere, and therefore the crowd are going to change. Yeah. So that the members of Celtic going to Celtic and coming out of Celtic, the crowd volumes are going to change. Yeah. Has that all been assessed as well?
Well, we're definitely aware that is an issue that's been raised by quite a lot of people, and it's definitely something we'll be looking at and examining.
But who's going to look at that, and has a risk assessment been taken in?
Well,
that sort of thing?
There's a whole issue. I go back to what I said right at the beginning, that essentially, from our point of view, the council is the body that has to justify the order. But we want to seek to get as much information as we can from people with an interest who've made
representations. So what's the liabilities? So that they've created this. So what's the liabilities of a public transport?
Yeah, but this is all things that we have to discuss at the hearing, not today. But rest assured, we're very well aware that is a very important issue that's been raised, and it's actually one of the bullet points that we've picked up, isn't it?
In relation to ScotRail and the private bus providers. I've been in dialogue with ScotRail since they refurbished Kilmarnock Station in 2014.
Right.
So I think it's absolutely essential that they are there, because the capacity has been reduced, and I've had quite a lot of dialogue with Glasgow City Council since the parking restriction came in, and I keep asking them if they've spoken to ScotRail and the private bus suppliers, and they always tell me they don't.
Okay, well...
So I think it has to happen that ScotRail are there and the private bus suppliers are there.
Well, I think we will obviously consider that, but there's obviously a clear feeling that you want us to ask ScotRail to come to the hearing. And so we will have to take that into account, as we will with the bus companies as well.
Leslie Jeffrey, season ticket holder. I just wanted to echo what the gentleman in front had said. You absolutely need the transport people here, because you're not giving us anything else.
Okay, well, see, what I was trying to do was to sort of put the onus on SPT first to see what they could provide. But I think it's clear that they're a sort of strategic player, provide all that. But I think you've accepted yourself that the bus companies and ScotRail will have more information about the capacity at the stations and how it can cope and that sort of thing. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Is that...
I think there needs to be a risk assessment, health and safety risk assessment. Looked at all the public transport routes. They're clearly not up for it at the moment. I've used public transport occasionally travelling to the stadium, and they just can't cope. If you start throwing more people onto public transport, the problem's just going to get worse.
Okay, these are matters for
the other thing as well to bear in mind is a lot of our games have been a Sunday, and the public transport is even worse on a Sunday. You've only got one service an hour out of most of the railway stations.
Okay, I'm sorry, I did say we were going to be quite strict on this. We've allowed a bit of leeway here, but these are matters for the hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
And we will definitely be considering them. Obviously, the council in the meantime will no doubt take a note of what people have said about survey information and impact analysis.
Also,
think about
on
that when preparing a statement.
The proposed reduction in air quality and emissions. Okay. I think if you look at the way the structure of Strathclyde passenger transport is around the city, most people that live in Glasgow, whatever part they live in, they've got to get into the city centre to then get out to Celtic Park. In my particular case, I would be commuting 10 miles for what takes me a four-mile journey in a car.
Okay, I'm allowing a bit more leeway because we're actually reasonably well on time at the moment, but we do not need to go into the subject matters at this stage. That's for the
lady
hearing.
in the green was next, and then the lady in black, and then the gentleman with the glasses.
Right.
The lady in the green behind you, please.
Hi, it's back onto the kind of process now.
Yep.
In terms of the hearing itself, I'm just wondering what we're going to do to enable kind of access as widely as possible to that hearing in terms of accessibility and then formality. I'm just thinking, will it be similar to this kind of structured discussion, or will there be the opportunity, you've talked about maps and things, is there the opportunity to have some things on screen to help people follow? Obviously plain English would be really helpful. This is a very, very kind of structured, formal document that's not really all that accessible to the vast majority of people in general, I would contend, as well as football supporters, speaking as one. So I'm just wondering what measures we can put in place to make sure it's as accessible and representative as possible for people that might want to take part.
Yep, well, the actual format of the hearing won't be like this. It will be a roundtable discussion, and the way it generally works in these type of hearings is that Mr. Guilford and I will sit at the top, and you would have the council on one side and then groupings of the other parties who are involved around the table, so everybody can see each other. We would control the discussion. It simply wouldn't be a free-for-all. It would be very structured. Everybody before the hearing will get the opportunity to see the written submissions of all the other parties. Nothing is not going to be publicly available and on the webpage. We can absolutely facilitate having the schedules and the maps available on either PowerPoint or on boards or both. As we alluded to earlier, we think the very first session of the hearing will be us asking the council to talk through the order and explain the content of the order in not just in plain English, but in geographical terms, so we can all be aware of where the changes will take place, which streets will be impacted, which streets won't, which streets will be emergency routes, which streets won't. That should help everybody, I think, fully understand. We fully appreciate how complex the order is and the varying levels of impacts it may or may not have on, you know, residents, supporters, the operation of the club, people visiting, people attending events. So we think that first session on the first day will help enormously with people's understanding, and hopefully it should go a long way to addressing the issues you have raised. The hearing will be limited to those who have made representations and indicated in writing that they intend to take part. Other parties will be very able to attend the hearing, but not actually physically sit at the table and take part. You will have had to make representations and be involved in the process already. We're at the point in the process whereby if you're not in already, it's difficult to opt in except at our express invitation. For example, Scottish Fire and Rescue, you know, we are very happy for them to attend because they have a particular role and a lot of information that people are interested in and information that you require to know. ScotRail and the commercial bus operators are others that we would desire to be there. And if we want evidence from those people, as the reporters holding the hearing into the order and examining the order, we can invite them to take part. There really, from this point forward, isn't an opportunity for other parties to simply come into the process. It would become too unwieldy and almost impossible to get a finite end. So I hope that answers your question, but I do think that first session should enable a lot of people to understand a lot more.
Thank you.
Right, it was this lady in the black coat first.
Hello. I'm a resident in the Athletes Village and I'll be representing the village residents. We have a village residents group and we have been looking at this order for quite some time. So I just wanted to make it clear that we will be represented at the main hearing. Okay?
Excellent. Good to know, thank you.
I haven't
come to you yet.
finished going through this. We've only got through, if you like, the main parties, the council, the Celtic Football Club, and the SPT and Police Scotland, and now the fire service as well, because we'd asked for their expertise, and we needed to sort that out a bit because there's a slightly different position for them because we're asking them to take part. They haven't made representations. But now we're still going to come on to, and I'm sure that you'll be picked up here.
Thank you.
This gentleman here.
Okay, we've still got some comments, haven't we? No, it's okay.
You say now that there's no openings now for people to take part. Does that include like written submissions and what have you?
No. There's ample opportunity for people to take part. What I'm saying is if you haven't made representations to the order, or if you're not involved or you're not one of the almost 1,200 people who's already involved in the process, then taking part in the hearing is a little more difficult. Under the regulations relating to traffic orders, you are to be a party to the hearing. You should have made a representation. If you haven't, and there is a particular reason why you haven't, and you now wish to be part of the process, then I would urge you to write to the programme officer and explain that situation.
I already have.
Well,
and I'd like to know where do you actually send written submissions to?
Well, we'll come into that. We have some dates to explain to you and give you all the information about that when we come to the end of this, just discussing which groups we've identified and in case there are any others that we think we might be able to align people who have similar issues.
Okay, fine.
I think if we can put it like this as well, it might help. We have to be aware of the statutory process and we have to make sure that people involved are not prejudiced in any way by the procedures we operate. So there's a structure, we have to make sure that we follow the statutory provisions. But I mean, I did indicate to you at the beginning that, I mean, for example, the statutory provisions in the regulations refer to objections. Basically, they're giving a right to people to object to an order which the council proposes to introduce. But we did clearly say that in order to consider that properly, we are obviously looking at considering comments from people who have expressed support. And that's not specifically referred to in the statute, but we have the flexibility to hear from people that we think we need to hear from to enable us to consider the objections properly. So that's what we're trying to do. And I think that we will try to do whatever we can. I mean, Scottish ministers are very keen for people to be able to take part in public hearings and inquiries. But we have to do it in a way that it doesn't prejudice anyone or breach any statutes. And so we need to be careful about that. But we will come on to that at the end to see how that can work. If I can maybe move on a bit now. Has anybody got anything else desperate they want to say? I'd like to just move on just to get through the way that we think these groupings might work. We've still got a reasonable amount of time left. Now, and there's a little bit of a difference here generally between this order and the Ibrox one, to the extent that we have very specific supporters associations in relation to Ibrox who we know are going to take part and represent supporters. From our reading of the representations, in the case of Celtic Park, we've got a situation where a lot of supporters have made individual representations, but we haven't picked up any supporters associations or clubs. So one of the things I was going to ask is whether anyone who is intending to participate in the hearing has a link with a supporters association, because often it's useful for that group to be able to put together an effective case that we can consider. I think some was it you, sir, that mentioned a liaison officer?
I think he was referring to the liaison officer from Celtic Park.
Right. Okay. So, you're referring to the actual liaison officer from the Celtic. Okay. I mean, we don't need to go any further with this unless there is an association who is involved in this. I'm just asking to be clear about that. But we can leave that and move on to how people might wish to group together. Now, on the other side of the argument, for those supporting the order, again, in relation to Ibrox, there are several community councils involved, and we haven't got any of those identified here, unless anyone is a member or an official of a community council. So I'm just asking that. If there isn't, again, we'll move on and deal with it in terms of the individual representations that have been lodged. Okay, now then I'm wanting to look at other community groups or organisations. Ms. Eileen Smiley?
Is that, yeah.
I think you spoke earlier, didn't you? Huh? And you represent the village residents group, is that right? And your position is essentially one of supporting the orders with the exception of bus parking. And there's a Mr. Frank Martin. Is Mr. Frank Martin here?
I'm particularly concerned about the
Sorry, you Mr. Martin?
Yes, I think so.
No, I just wanted to be clear.
No, I'm particularly concerned that, although I go to the stadium, I'm concerned about the infrastructure in and around the stadium. So I think it's important that if a hearing was going to be taken, that the concerns of the individual supporters and fans going to the match are not airbrushed out of the discussion, and are allowed to put forward their case, which is a very strong representation in terms of how it impinges on people's lives.
Okay. Now, so we have the the start of a nucleus of a group there, possibly. That's what we're really looking for. In terms of, I don't know whether there are any other residents from that group who are here who would want to get involved, but this is what we were saying earlier about the use of the schedule and the identification of people who could maybe group together to give evidence. So you have a village residents group as an obvious group that can present a case on behalf of a number of people. So you're clearly indicating that you want to take part in the hearing, but presumably you'd be happy for any other people who've made representations to fit in with and join that group to give evidence. And the way we'll have to do that is, from today's meeting, is for people to be aware of other like-minded people who've made representations who might wish to group together to form a group to submit evidence. Okay, so right, we'll hold on that one for a moment. Now, I am aware that there are several residents of a new development at Barons Vale. Do we have some? Now, these are all people who hadn't made representations, is that fair? But wished to be involved in the hearing process. I think we can say that we intend to hear evidence on behalf of that group. That's fair to do that. I think there's a Mr. Lewis Cole. Mr. Cole, you had expressed a willingness to work with a group, in fact, which is very hopeful, or possibly even lead one. I don't know. And I think we've got about 9 representations, and so that's another group who may wish to join together.
So
I mean, we don't.
I'm in the Belvedere Village. Basically.
Sorry?
I'm in the Belvedere Village. Just
okay.
Belvedere Village, yeah, okay. Is that different to the Barons Vale?
It is, yeah.
It is. Okay, so we've got 2 different residential areas.
3.
3.
Because the Athletes Village.
Sorry? Oh yes,
Belvedere.
yes. No, I'm aware of the Athletes Village because you made a representation anyway. And so what we now have is, if you like, a number of areas in support of the order. But of course the village resident groups will give evidence about the bus parking issue, which is really an objection, isn't it? That side of it. Yeah. Okay, right. I think we're clear about that. Yes.
One more question.
More statement, and you sort of alluded to the possibility that the people in the Baronsville development hadn't made representation. I know for a fact that isn't true. Not the biggest point in the world. You are making sort of overtures that you're listening to us, and that's okay. But it is on fact that people have made representations from that area.
Okay. Well, I mean, we can only read what is put in front of us in terms of the representations we have, and the 8 or 9 people who wrote in about that were not on the list as having made representations.
No,
we're not preventing you from getting involved in this, because as you're aware, we've agreed that we can consider that. But it's like Ms. Lynch said earlier, that we have to be careful with that, because what we're essentially doing, we're in the middle of a process where we're considering representations that have been made following the publication of the order. But anyway, I mean, you're obviously saying that you wish to be involved in that.
I think what you're saying is that you're aware of residents from Barons Vale who've already made representations. I think what we're saying is we've had contact from a number of additional residents in Barons Vale who hadn't made representations, like the gentleman behind you, who now wish to be involved in the process. And what we're saying is we're perfectly happy for those residents to be involved in the hearing process from this point forward, in addition to any others from Barons Vale who've already made written representations and been involved.
Sorry, so your name again was?
Johnny Mulseed.
Yes, we have that, don't we? But we have
it was more a point of order rather than anything to go into too much deep discussion on.
No, okay. We certainly have your name down as somebody who wrote in saying that they wish to take part, but we don't have a record of a representation from yourself, but you're saying that other people have. Yes. So I don't know that we have anybody here who has made a representation from that development. Looks like not. But that doesn't mean that they can't be involved. This is an opportunity for you to actually contact people who've made representations. Sorry? Yeah.
My name's Trent. I'm in Barons Vale as well. We are in contact with those people who have made representation. So we do have a community group. So unfortunately, they couldn't be here tonight. So we can be in discussion with them.
What we need is for people to get together. And of course, we're going back again to the difficulty of the redaction process in terms of all the representations, because all the surnames have been redacted. So you're going to have to contact the programme officers to be able to, if you well, you may know people, and that's fair enough, but you may want to look at the representations, and if you need to contact anybody, you can speak to the programme officers, and as long as everybody is happy with that, then you can exchange contact information. But obviously it needs permission, because the contact information is something that won't be in the public domain. No. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Is Mr. Fordyce here from the Gallowgate Parish Church? Mr. Fordyce, yes. It's just, yours is essentially an individual representation, which we will be considering separately, but we have you down as someone who intends to participate.
That's correct.
So we just want to record that and confirm that. And then there are several businesses who have made representations. The only one that we have on the list of people who wish to take part in the hearing is Carol Burns, and I think it's Ms. Leslie McGavin who you're representing. I mean, if you want to say what your business is, or if you, it's up to you.
We are here representing all the NHS services, so the pharmacy, doctor and dental practice on Springfield Road.
Right.
Carol Burns, the name you mentioned, is the owner of the pharmacy, and myself and my brother, Gordon and Leslie McGavin, we're the owners of the dental practice.
Okay.
There's also Dr. Khan, who is the local doctor.
Right. And obviously you wish to take part in the hearing, your objection will be considered?
Yeah, I think Carol Burns submitted something that mentioned us all in her submission, but we will now possibly speak to Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board.
So this relates to the point that the gentleman made to you earlier. Sorry, sometimes we can't necessarily pick up this until we get through, because obviously it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And since we've got a representation here, and you're saying you want to take part in the hearing, that solves that problem.
Absolutely.
And you'll be able to make representations.
And you would be fine if we have a representative from Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board joining us, because we'll now probably need to take this further up the kind of chain.
Anyone who's made representations and wishes to take part in the hearing, you can be represented by anyone you wish.
Perfect.
And so you can bring along people who can perhaps give expert advice on things for us to consider. And that applies to everybody. You can all do that.
Thanks.
Okay?
I perhaps might clarify that. Mr. Guilford said you could bring along anybody. Perhaps not anybody. Ideally, what we are saying is, in the way that the football club explained, they're bringing a number of experts on various matters relating directly to the order. We're very happy to hear if you want to employ your own transport consultant or air quality assessment person or anybody who would directly give evidence relating to the order. We are very happy to hear from them. Not anybody at all, we should clarify. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so let's see where we are. Okay, so now that's actually clarified things quite a bit. We can start to see who is actually going to be taking part in the hearing. Now, there are then all the bullet points that we put in section 3, which identify all the subject matter. And there are a lot of people, as we said at the beginning, in fact the majority of the objections relate to matters of principle, in principle objecting to the order. And so we need to break that down, because we're going to have to consider the component parts of that, and we must structure that. So I'm just going to go through those briefly now to see if we can identify any groups that wish to take part, or if we can agree guidelines in which they can be formed in the next month or so, for example, whatever. Now, the first subject that we'd got was the management of inconsiderate and unsafe parking in residential areas within the zone. Now, that clearly may include site-specific areas. We've already identified some areas in which residents are very concerned about this issue. And so we've got groups already covering that. But there are also, we know, I think there are 13 people that we've identified who have said they wish to take part in the hearing, who have covered this from the other side of the argument, stating that people generally park considerately and that there are other ways to deal with inconsiderate and unsafe parking. This is one of the areas where there is actually some common ground. And so it's not absolutely beyond the bounds of possibility that we could have a group that includes people from both sides. Maybe I'm asking a bit too much there. But I just wondered if anyone has a particular interest in that and would be keen to either lead or contribute to a group on that matter. If no one can decide now, we can try and deal with it later, but it would be helpful. Yes?
In what sense was that?
Sorry?
In what sense you mean?
Well, this is just looking at, I mean, as I say, what we tried to do was pick out the key subjects which had been raised by people who were opposed to the order. And so this was one in terms of the inconsiderate and unsafe parking, which is one of the key issues which has generated, in the council's view, the need for the order. And we've got people from the resident side who are going to be giving evidence, and I'm looking to see if there are people on the other side of the argument about other ways to deal with the matter of inconsiderate and unsafe parking. Now, obviously the situation can be at the hearing that we hear from individual people, but what we're trying to do is just to see if we can structure this a bit better and get people to work together.
But how realistically, how are you going to get that? You know, are you going to have to ask the person to lead it?
Yeah,
going to social media, and ask for people to come forward?
Well, I know this is difficult, and we're just exploring the possibility. So, sir, if you were interested in doing this,
I wouldn't mind. I mean, one of my points I raised earlier on was that I've never parked in front of anybody's driveway.
Yes.
I'm always considerate where I park.
Okay.
You know, I appreciate people live in that area.
So you might be very happy to lead a group on this. So, and sorry, your name was?
Michael Dwyer.
Michael Dwyer.
I made representations I wanted to attend anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Dwyer, people know that you're taking part, and they could contact the programme officer, and if they wish to take part in it, and could contact you if you're willing to give them.
So how do I go about that then? go onto social media, do a...
No, you don't
email
have
the
to,
programme officer.
You don't have to
Right.
do anything. You can
Okay.
email but the programme officers know because you've just expressed an interest. So
Right.
they know that you're happy to look at, lead or be involved with a group on that issue. So people could contact the programme officer who have similar views, and you could start to form a group together to
Okay.
give evidence at the hearing.
Yeah,
It
okay.
would help us, and it would probably help the argument on both sides, because it's more structured that way.
Yeah, even if there's not a group, I want to be part of it anyway.
You want to, yes,
Yeah.
of course. You will be able to give your evidence on this, but since we've got a possible nucleus of a group there, I think that's helpful to know. Yes.
I'm now aware that there's other representations from residents here from the other two villages, and I think it would be a good idea if the Athletes Village, the Barnesville Village and the Belvedere Village, we all got together and made a representation as one
You
large
can do
group
that.
of
Yep.
residents.
If you wish to do so.
And I just wanted to say that because there's representation here tonight from the other villages, which I didn't know of
Right.
So,
well, that was that's
yeah.
part of the purpose of this meeting.
Yeah, I said, because the problems that we have in the Athletes Village are no doubt the same problems that they have.
Yes. Well, we would encourage that. And we're happy if you appear as one overall group covering a number of residential areas, or if there's a series of groups within. But I mean, I know that, Mrs. Smiley, I know that you have an issue about the bus parking, which is particular to that. So, of course, you know, we've got to. Yeah, no, you can certainly do that, and you can have a little subgroup or something that deals with that particular issue. I mean, it can all be, and it's however you want to present it. But the way with people working together, it makes it easier for us. So thank you for that. Okay, well, I'm going to move on a little bit now because time is getting on now. Something that the gentleman, I think you raised this, the displacement of parking to areas out with the zone, which is an issue raised by a lot of people. I have the names here, and I know that there are 3 residents who live outside the zone. Mr. John Lees, is he here? Maybe. Mr. Stephen Batchen and Mr. Christopher Clark. Oh, okay. So you have indicated, obviously, that you wish to take part in the hearing, and you're concerned about the effect of the order in displacing vehicles that currently park into your area. So this is obviously an issue.
Yeah, so I stay in the Eastfields estate, and we are currently a mini car park already.
Right.
And that's purely because the cars can still continue to go down as far as they are doing so.
So are you happy to lead a group?
Definitely, yeah. I'm just not sure how many people within the estate have actually objected. I know that if they can now send further objections, there would be so many more people that this is now taking place. So we're both happy, or me singly, to lead any group representations.
Okay. Have you looked at the schedule? Because we've put a schedule on the webpage, and that is one of the issues where we've listed the numbers. So you can look at all those. You won't know who they are because the surnames have been redacted, but you'll be able to get that information from the programme officers if everyone is happy.
Well, did you mean only 3 have indicated they're going to be here, but there's more than 3 who have objected to this then? As I would hope.
Yes, the 3 people I mentioned are the people who are taking part in the hearing.
Yeah, but there's more objections from Eastfields, I would hope so, yeah,
And
okay.
you can contact those if people are agreeable to it.
Okay.
But one thing I need to make clear is that we will respect people's right to rely on written submissions. And if people want to rely on written submissions, the substance of their objection has to be in the public domain, and it is because it's on the website, but their names are not. And we would respect that. If people are not taking part in the hearing, there's no reason why they would have to give their name out to the hearing.
So see the objections, are they grouped approved in terms of different, like people agreeing with the same thing, or is it the date they came in as an objection?
Yeah, they are. Well, what we've done is the ones that we can do at the moment are listed under headings, and there is one in relation to the displacement of.
So is the programme officer the best person to find out to group them all? Okay.
You can look at the objections, you can read them from the website, and then if people agree, I mean, the programme officer will contact each individual and say, look, are you wanting to join a group? If so, share contact details. And if everybody agrees with that, that's fine in terms of GDPR. But the council's policy is such that that information isn't in the public domain unless, you know, people wish it to be.
Okay.
And now there are also, as it happens, there are 4 visitors to the area on match days who have indicated that they have concern about this. Obviously looking at it from the other side, but it's Mr. David McCann. I think you've already spoken.
No.
Sorry? Okay. Carry on.
Yeah, the 2 points which I want to be represented on is one is I live outside Glasgow, so and I know one of the areas is people who are travelling from afar, and I think it's important that that complexity is brought to the fore. The second thing is I'm glad Police Scotland are represented tonight, because I think there's a particular issue that it would be good if Police Scotland could comment on at the hearing, whereas people who park on the west side of the stadium, I attend both Celtic Park and the Emirates, and the other side of the Clyde Gateway will be pushed back into, from what is a well-lit domestic area, into an industrial area that is particularly not well lit, in some cases not lit at all, and also at the back end of Bridgeton, where there have been some very serious incidents with Celtic fans in the past.
Okay, well, that is certainly something that you can raise. Mr. Alan Douglas, Mr. and Mrs. Whitters, and Stephen Murray also, I have a note of, who said they're going to take part in the hearing, and they also have an issue about the displacement of vehicles from the zone into other residential areas. I don't know whether any of those are here. But it doesn't matter, because the same principle applies. You can go through the programme officer and see if it's possible to join together. Now, if I can finish that, I need to move on pretty quickly because we're sort of struggling a bit for time now. The remaining issues really are economic impact. There's at least 8 objectors who have referred to that. Disadvantaged groups, which is women, children, the elderly, and disabled people. At least 18 have raised that. And the one that is the most prevalent is to do with off-street parking and public transport issues. There's at least 20 people who are here tonight who have raised that. Now, I don't think these are quite large groups of people, so I don't think we can gain too much by going into that in any detail. I think that what I would say about that is that if there is anybody particularly interested in leading a group, you could let me know now, let us know now, and people can then consider whether or not groups could be formed. If there's no one, it's not that important at the moment. It's something that we can possibly try to develop. The only thing is, it's difficult to pick up from the representations these subjects because there's so many representations to read through. But if people in any way can get together on those and form groups, particularly in transport, possibly on the subcategories that I mentioned, then that would be helpful. Okay, yes.
I run a Celtic fans website and a podcast, and I've been engaging with Glasgow City Council, and the first person I spoke to about public transport around Celtic Park was Nicola Sturgeon when she was Cabinet Secretary for Infrastructure and Finance. So 6 years I've been gaining evidence about what isn't available on public transport as an alternative to the car parking, so I'd quite like to be involved in that side of things.
Okay.
Sorry, my name's Brian Gilmore.
Brian Gilmore, okay. Thanks, Mr. Gilmore. Well, that's helpful. Because then if people are particularly interested, you see, this is the way that we can perhaps start some of these groups going. It's not easy. I mean, I appreciate that because there are so many people involved and there are so many issues. Anyway, at the end of the day, if insofar as people are not in groups but still wish to make points about all of these issues, that we will make provision for that. And I don't know, I mean, how many we could, there's obviously quite a lot of people who will wish to make individual contributions. I mean, let's have a show of hands. I mean, how many people would want to make individual contributions if they did not form a group? I assume it's most of you. We will have to accommodate that, and that will be done in terms of a structure, and it'll be done under the subject headings. So we'll hear from the council, the football club, Police Scotland, Transport, SPT, and then from the groups that we've identified, and then they'll have anyone else can become involved in that process. All we're trying to do is to make it as efficient as possible, at the actual hearing.
And you should bear in mind that the weight we will give is to the evidence, not to whether or not you're part of a group or the club or the council. It is the evidence in front of us that we will have regard to, not where it comes from particularly. So the fact that you're not in a group does not in any way diminish the evidence you'll give us at the hearing.
No, that's absolutely right. But what we're trying to do is to try and get through it as efficiently as we can. So, and I think that will help. That will help people who've made representations to become involved. The one thing we would say, though, is that, and we have to try and deal with this, and that we've got to avoid repetition. It doesn't matter how many times people say the same thing; it's still the same issue. So when you've got a lot of people individually, we've got to try and avoid repetition, but we'll manage that. But anyway, it's been very helpful, I think, this, and hopefully we can move forward a bit with that in perhaps the next month or so. And then finally, we have to mention provision for contributions from those attending the hearing who have not made representations. Well, the easiest way, I think, as Ms. Lynch said earlier, the easiest way is to get involved with people who have made representations and join that, so that we're focusing on the things that have been, the subjects that have been raised in the representations. People who are attending otherwise, and there could be quite a lot because the hearing will be advertised in the evening times, so there might be a lot of interest in that. They would tend to be observers, but they wouldn't be expected to be submitting evidence, but it certainly doesn't preclude people seeking clarification on particular matters or making points of a factual nature. If something new was raised, then that would be more problematic, but we would have to deal with it on its merits at the time, and considering other parties who might have an opposing view, which we would have to take into account. Okay, so I think we've agreed what we can so far. I don't think there's much more that we can do, but let's see what we can achieve in the next month or so, perhaps, in terms of pursuing this. Can we move on to item 6, because we need to make some progress. I don't know whether they're going to give it. Sorry, yes.
Just one last question before you move on to 6. The heading of the order refers to events at Celtic Park and the Emirates Arena.
Yes.
Everything we've heard tonight has been about events at Celtic Park. Did the responses to the order, or the proposed order, have any great weight of concern about events at Emirates Arena?
Certainly there are references in quite a few of the objections we saw to people talking about events at the Emirates Arena, because it's just across the road, isn't it, from Celtic Park? So it is. But there is no representation as far as we're aware from anyone directly involved with the Emirates Arena. But it's certainly an element of a subject matter to be discussed and raised at the hearing, and some people have raised it. So we'll be considering it anyway in the written submissions. So it's a good point to raise. I think that is certainly something that we will have to do. Okay, can we move on to statements and documents? We need to agree the parties who are going to be submitting statements. I think it's clear the council, Celtic Football Club, Police Scotland, SPT, and the fire service will do so. And we'd like one, I think, from the village residents group, particularly if you're going to widen that group to other residents. I think a statement will be necessary. Now, those are the only ones that I have. Sorry.
NHS services.
Oh, well, the NHS services, yes. I'm a bit ambivalent on this. Would you like to submit a statement?
Yep.
I think, because the point is, everyone can make further submissions anyway. You know, what we're trying to discuss here is people that we're actually saying, because of their involvement in the hearing, need to submit a statement and circulate, because it has to be circulated to everybody else. So there's a little bit of work in it. So there's a difference between that and people putting in further written submissions, which they can do either whether they want to attend the hearing or whether they're just making written submissions, dealing with written submissions. Anyway, you want to be included with a statement. Okay. I think, can we leave it at that as the people who need to submit statements, or is anyone else desperate to do so?
I think if I get put together.
Well, absolutely. And of course, okay, I think we need to leave that one in abeyance a bit for the moment. These are the people that we will need statements from. If there are groups, then I think it's very advantageous to submit a statement, and we would agree the arrangements for that at the time. I think we said about a month, and I think if we can do that within a month and get any groups going, that will probably be sufficient. Okay. Now I'm also going to ask whether there is any potential for parties submitting statements of agreed matters. This is probably more for the likes of the council and the football club, who are going to be submitting detailed evidence. And we've got lots of prospect of quite a lot of witnesses coming along and contributing to the discussion. I'm wondering, to the extent that there might be, what I'm thinking about is things like parking surveys, impact analyses on economics, on amenity, traffic matters, whether there's factual, it usually is factual rather than subjective information. But I'm just wondering if there is a prospect of doing that might reduce the time taken at the hearing.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly we would welcome receiving from the council its impact assessments, risk assessments, the various survey data that it has in relation to this order, and once we've had an opportunity to review that, that would give us the opportunity to agree where possible, and certainly help focus the issues between us.
Yes, okay.
That would require a staggered process in relation to the production of documentation and statements.
Yes. Well, of course, the council will have to submit its statement to you, and the council will hopefully provide all the evidence to justify the order. I obviously don't know at this stage what is available, but that's for the council to decide.
Absolutely, and I think that's the point. At the moment, there is very little available, so if there is to be any scope for agreement, there would need to be fairly significant advance notice from the council of the material that is available. And perhaps the council could be invited now to release the material that it has on file in relation to data, surveys, assessments that support the order, and that would allow matters to progress sooner rather than later.
Well, I mean, is the council of a view that there might be a prospect of agreed statements on factual matters like surveys and impact analyses, these sorts of things?
Absolutely. If there is scope to discuss and agree, then I think it would result in a more focused hearing session. The council did originally carry out a vehicle and parking survey, which is document number 1 on the website, but that was back in May 2016. A further match-day photographic parking survey was carried out on the 6th of April 2019, which was a Celtic home game against Livingston. And there was, for comparison, there was a non-match day photographic survey on the 11th of June 2019.
Okay.
And the council is happy to share those with the football club, but if appropriate, these documents can be uploaded to the website so that they are available to all participants.
I think we would encourage dialogue, particularly between the council and the football club about this, to see what can be resolved. But in any event, of course, we now have to agree a period for the submission of statements. Now, I think what we were going to suggest was 6 weeks to submit statements, and then another month for parties to assimilate that information before the hearing. And the hearing we had thought would be at the earliest around the 19th to the 20th, 19th or 20th of May, at the latest in early June. Now, I know that Celtic Football Club have now made a submission, which may put that in doubt in terms of a legal submission about the order. One thing we have to make clear is, I should say this, is that whilst we have been appointed to manage the hearing process, conduct the hearing, and the council has agreed that we'll follow our guidelines on that. It's the council that is responsible for the decision on whether or not to make the order after they've received our report. And so legal issues are going to be a matter for the council. So in our position in that respect may have to be a recommendation rather than a ruling, if you see what I mean. We'll have to discuss all that, but I'm just putting that out now, just to make that clear, that we may be in the position of just making a recommendation about that, because the council is responsible for the legality and the implementation of the order.
Sir, I understand that, but at the moment, in terms of procedure and timetable, I think it would be prudent to establish a timetable that gives time for that issue to be addressed and for a decision to be taken on it before the commitment of the very significant number of issues as we've discussed this evening.
I think what you're saying is that you need longer time.
I think we need longer time. I hate to be the one to raise this also, but it does seem to me the current environment and the issue at the moment in relation to the government's action plan on the coronavirus ought also to be accommodated in the programme that we're talking about at the moment. The current expectation is that the action plan will move from the delay phase to the containment phase in the course of the next few weeks. And that might take us into a period in May and June where it would not be appropriate to hold a hearing, but certainly might well impact on the ability and efficiency of the preparations in the period leading up to that. So standing those two factors, the need to address the preliminary issue and the need to be cognizant of that current issue, it seems to me that a May-June timetable is overly ambitious and perhaps not appropriate. And it may be prudent actually to pause those preparations for a period that takes us beyond the summer period and therefore hopefully out with the disruption that unfortunately it appears that the coronavirus issue is likely to impose on the ability to hold a hearing and meetings such as this.
Okay, Council.
Indoors, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you have a view on that on behalf of the Council?
In terms of the coronavirus threat, yes, the Council is alive to that. However, I think trying to anticipate when there may or may not be shutdowns which would impact on either the preparations or the hearing, I could regret saying this, but I think it's perhaps premature to factor that into the timetable at this stage, although...
Well, there's a lot of uncertainties about that, obviously.
And if we were to fix, I'm going to suggest July or August just for comparison. If we were to fix a timetable with those dates, we could run into the same or similar issues. So it is a live issue and it's got to be taken account of.
Okay. Well, obviously, we had thought that 19th and 20th of May was the earliest possibility. And otherwise, we thought it would go into June. But obviously, on behalf of Celtic Football Club, you're suggesting even later.
Yes, and the most recent guidance from the government would seem to support that. I'm not wanting to, avoid a hearing as expeditiously as possible, but it seems to me that we might put a lot of people to a lot of time and effort. And also, regardless of our ability to attend, there is a large number of representations in this process covering a wide demographic, and it's important that they are able to attend if need be, and that could be compromised if there are restrictions on indoor gatherings or the people who can attend indoor gatherings in the period that we're looking at. And while it's uncertain, I think all of the guidance at the moment is heading towards movement into the containment phase in a number of weeks, which will impact on the programme even if we're out of that by June. So it does seem to me that while it might be regrettable, it is much more prudent to have a timetable that we can actually have some prospect of adhering to, rather than have everybody set off on a timetable that is vulnerable to change, quite significantly so in the current environment.
Okay, well, just putting that aside for a minute, can we agree the principles in relation to the submission of statements? Okay, the timing, but in terms of whether all statements should be submitted at the same time, because obviously they can be staggered. Some people like the council statement first because they're voting the order, so forth. But I think we would probably seek, because there's several people involved in this, we would probably seek a single date for statements if possible, possibly with, say, a 2-week period for responses to be made.
So I think the position is perhaps different when it involves the council. I think the council should go first. That would be appropriate, given, as you have made the point several times in the course of this evening, that this is their order and the order they have to justify, and also to explain the material that they are relying on in making that order. And I think it would be more appropriate for their statement to be available before the other parties have to respond. Then it does not need to be staggered thereafter. There could be a single date of response following upon receipt and consideration of the council's statement. And that would better help focus issues and be a more efficient process overall in my submission.
Okay, what do you think about that then? Is the council willing perhaps to submit a statement first and then perhaps a month to allow other people to make their statements in the light of the council statement? Isn't that fair?
So This is a decision for you. The council would be in a position, if you required it, for the council to submit its statement first. But
Well,
it's a matter for you.
We realise it's a matter for us, but we were giving you an opportunity to give us a view about it.
The conventional approach in hearing sessions is for parties to submit hearing statements on the same date with an opportunity for comment and follow-up. So to that extent, I would, if you're asking for the council's view, our view is that we should follow the conventional approach. However, if you insist on the council submitting first, we are in a position to do that.
Okay, well, perhaps you can leave that with us. I think that's something that we will have to discuss. If you go back to the code of practice, which is old, it just requires the council to submit a statement. But in this case, we realise that it needs a lot more than that. So we have to make a judgment about that. So you're saying, with our inclination, it would be good to have them all together, but the football club is a little bit concerned about that because you think the council should state what their reasons are in more detail and provide background information that other people can look at.
I think that statement would be appropriate for the other parties to have available when focusing their statements.
Okay. Can I have a view from other people who will be submitting statements? I don't know whether Police Scotland or Transport Scotland has a view on this because you haven't made representations as such. But Ms Smiley and others who have talked about the group, what do you think about this? Because you'll be submitting statements, so you have a say in this.
The process is all new to me, so I would say that whether the council submits their statement first, I'm not too sure what the advantage in that is. Obviously, Celtic think, that the council should do this, but I think the council should make the decision when they submit their statement.
Okay, the advantage for you would be that you would see what the council had to say in defence of the order, and then you would be able to submit your statement.
Yes, I'm also very interested to see what Celtic submit as well.
I'm sure you are, yes.
The person behind.
Sorry?
The person behind is. Welcome to do that.
Yeah, sorry, I agree with the council should be providing information on the website for everybody to see, but also on the timetable point, what was, I think is very important, it was touched on by the Celtic at the very start. Sorry to go back to the start again, but this, for me, will affect the whole proceedings in the timetable. The exclusion zones in particular have definitely either been changed or given out in more detail, so all the objections so far were based on a black circle without a great detail from what I remember, and I'm pretty sure my memory is good on that point, because I spent a lot of time looking at it. But now in February, it was more specific in terms of streets, so there should be a further chance for other people to send further objections. So and when you go to the council's website, all the public notices and street notices are all dated 2018, so it suggests that there was no further information available to anybody else that wanted to object to it. So I think that's a massive, and that needs to be dealt with first and foremost before there's any other dates put in place for anything, because that is completely the first issue that has to be dealt with as far as I can see, and I don't see the council have made it available to anybody else who wants to object with more specific guidelines in terms of exclusions. So for me, first point, council should provide their background information, but certainly I don't think any timetable date should get put in place until this issue has been resolved, but that's my opinion on it.
Okay, well, I suppose what we're trying to do is have an efficient process as possible. And so I think we would have liked to have had a contingency at least for a date for the hearing and statements, but it's now become pretty complicated with a number of issues. Firstly, we have the legal submission that the football club has intimated that it's going to make at the hearing, but that might be resolved by discussion with the council in the meantime, but we don't know. And then, of course, there's the issue of just when it's appropriate to actually try to seek the statements, and that will determine the date for the hearing. I don't know to what extent we can take on board the coronavirus issue, because it's uncertain.
Yep.
At this stage, we don't really know what's actually going to happen and how serious it will be. Yes?
Thank you. I appreciate I've spoken before. As a resident and a supporter as well, this has been hanging over us for quite some time now. So as you've stated, I think the original notices, as incomplete as they were posted in 2018. It's now 2020. I would also like to see this matter drawn to a close as soon as possible, but it's more important to me as a resident that it's done properly. So if we need to take a little bit more time so that people can see what's actually being proposed, consider it and respond to it adequately, and then with all the measures that were taken in public health, I mean, some of us are involved in some quite scary discussions at work that I don't want to spread panic about, but I think it would be prudent to at least expect some disruption, if not in terms of holding a hearing, in terms of the organisations you're expecting to provide statements. There might be staff absences that will come into play, and people being deployed onto other matters. So let's set ourselves a realistic timetable and get this right, rather than rush it in before something else happens.
Okay. Well, I think the first point I would make is that it's not usual, but it's possible to have another pre-hearing meeting if we need one. And you know, it's sort of shaping up to a situation where I think we might actually need that, because we're sort of getting a staged approach here. It seems to us, I think, that what we're leading to is trying to resolve the issue, the legal issue that is being raised by the football club, which is actually questioning the validity of the order.
So that is very strongly.
That would mean starting from scratch.
It would.
No other way of dealing with that.
It does seem appropriate. You mentioned a few moments ago that we intend to raise at the hearing the legal issue. And yes, we will do that if it has not been resolved beforehand. But it does seem to me an absolute priority that it ought to be resolved beforehand, before the process continues into that more detailed assessment, including the statements, the documents, and the actual hearing. And so the timetable and programme would be appropriate if it allowed that to be resolved as a preliminary issue before fixing the further timetable for the other matters. And perhaps your suggestion of a further hearing would be the way to do that, a further pre-hearing meeting rather.
And it maybe we can do without that if all we've got left is that, because obviously the groups will have progressed, people will have progressed their cases and so forth. So it may be that if it's just the timing that's left, that could be dealt with without a pre-hearing meeting. But if necessary, we could have another pre-hearing meeting if things were more complicated. Okay, well, I think then that probably what we're getting towards. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to follow up on the discussion about the legal issue which Celtic has raised. The council is very happy for this to be dealt with on a preliminary basis,
right?
Rather than it being carried over to the hearing session. It would seem sensible for these issues to be explored and addressed. If there is going to be a definitive decision on it, I previously suggested that the council would respond to points raised within 7 days. Now, I think if this is leading to a definitive decision at this stage, it would be more appropriate to have a period of 14 days to respond.
All right. Were you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, I think so. So perhaps what we're looking at then is to deal with this legal submission first, and for you to clearly indicate the content of it. I mean, you've just given an outline, haven't you? Yeah. And you can provide that to us and send it to the council. And then if you do that within 14 days, and then the council responds within 14 days, that's a month from now.
We'd said the 24th for an exchange from the club to the council, and then that would be the 7th of April.
Yeah, 7th of April. Instead of the 30th.
Instead of the
31st
31st of March.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, well, sorry.
There's a question.
Right.
As it's now almost seems like maybe a step back's being taken, would the communication between Celtic Football Club and Glasgow City Council be available on website for us to be able to have a check on what's going on? It seems that this legal issue should have been raised before a pre-hearing actually happened, and all of us spent time sitting on this, but
Well, we can only address matters as they're raised by the parties, and it was raised this evening by the club, so it is now being addressed. All of it will be available on the webpage, and you will be kept informed if there's going to be a change to the status of the order or the process of examining the order.
Okay,
so
thank you.
It will all be publicly available.
Just as a general point, everything that is before us for consideration has to be in the public domain. That is a requirement that we will not move from, apart from exceptional cases where there's a particular justification. But generally speaking, everything that we're considering has to be in the public domain, so that everybody from both sides can see what it is that we're considering. Because it wouldn't be fair if there was information that we were looking at that somebody wasn't able to see. So when the football club provides this submission, which will be submitted to the council, and it will be submitted, but obviously it's submitted to the council, it will then be submitted to us through the council, and then it will be on the website. We'll put it on the website, and then when the council responds, that will be on the website. And I don't think we can then take it any further today, other than to say that we will consider that, decide what we think needs to be done, and then take appropriate action to either have another pre-hearing meeting or to issue guidance on what we're going to do. But I don't want to go in. This is a complicated issue. It's a complex issue. It's controversial. There's strong feelings on both sides. So I want to go into the hearing with as much being sorted out as possible. And since we've had this legal submission being made, which needs a council response, then we'll need to look at that. Is everyone happy with that process? Because that's really as far as we're going to go today. I mean, hopefully it's been helpful to everyone to discuss all the other procedural matters which we need to address. But we don't even need to go into number 7 because we're not setting the date of the hearing. The only other issue is that, sorry.
There's a question from the council.
It's a points for the council under other matters. I'm not sure if you're quite there yet.
Well, I was just going to cover 7, first of all, to the extent that I don't know whether there's a view about this, but the Royal Concert Hall could be used as a venue for the hearing. That's the only information we really have at the moment. I think there are rooms available with a capacity of 500 or lower. Obviously, there's an issue about how many people are likely to want to come to the hearing, and that the football club might have some advice on that. Supporters might have some advice on that. So there may be logistical limits, but the basic principle is that people who wish to attend the hearing can do so, and it's advertised on that basis. So we will pursue with the council the Royal Concert Hall. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. Well, we have to leave that there for the moment. Other matters, the key thing on this before, sorry, I will take your point, but matters agreed at and arising from this meeting will be uploaded to the web page as soon as possible. And we're allowing a period of 14 days for people to comment on that. There's been quite a lot discussed today, so we're going to have a careful think about this and set out what we think. That's why we say agreed at and arising from. because it's whatever's agreed today, and we've got to look at that, and if we think things are arising, we'll put them in. It doesn't just affect people here, people who are not here can also respond and contribute to that. So we're still in quite a complex situation here, but all comments will be taken into account before the note's finalised. And the note will be finalised on the basis of the action that we're taking, the primary one of which is to try and sort this legal issue out, because that will determine what happens next.
Yes, it's a brief update on a procedural matter. In terms of Regulation 16.3 of the 1999 regulations, there is a standard 2-year period for orders being made following the first publication of the notice. Now, the first publication of the notice was the 4th of May 2018, which would mean that the standard period expires in May this year. The Council has, however, applied for and obtained from the Scottish Government a 6-month extension of that period. So the 6-month extension is to 4th of November this year.
Okay, but that's quite tight.
It is, however, that there is an opportunity for the Council to seek up to 4 extensions of 6 months.
So you're just drawing that to our attention, that
Indeed.
it may be the case that you will have to ask for another extension under Regulation 16.3.
Indeed.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We'll make a note of that in the note of the meeting. Okay, well, we've run over a little bit, but hopefully that's not caused too much difficulty. Is there anything else anyone wishes to raise under any other business? Yes? Is there something?
Get that person there.
Oh, sorry.
You've, I think, rather gently tried to have people group together their views, I think particularly in terms of Celtic supporters, and I think I'm one of a number of individual supporters here tonight. I think that it's quite difficult when there's 60,000 of us to actually come together with a focal point. And I can understand from your perspective why you'd want that single group. Also understand why the club has a certain reluctance in being the people who would actually represent the individual supporters.
Yeah.
Having said that, I wonder whether the sports liaison officer might maybe even hang back after the meeting, have a weekend discussion, maybe with other Celtic supporters here tonight, just a short chat, just see where we can get a focal point for our views, because I think that'll make things a lot easier for yourself and for the process, rather than individual supporters repeating the same views over and over again.
Well, I mean, we would encourage discussion to take place whenever it's appropriate to do so, and please do so whenever you can.
Just in terms of taking advantage of the fact that the people who are here also have a particular view on it, and the club are here today, rather than going away and dealing with emails later on. It's quite difficult for individuals, and one here has put themselves forward for it, but it's quite difficult to commit to that without the kind of backing of support like the club would have.
Is that sort of a general view? I mean, obviously, you can do it tonight, or you can arrange a time to get together some...
All I'm talking about is whether for 5 minutes after this, there's a brief discussions.
Well, that's entirely...
I'm just checking to see it.
Okay.
This room is available until 10 o'clock, so you could take the opportunity now if you have time to do so. As you say, while you have people in the room, it might be easier to do it.
And then what you need to do, because we've got this 14-day period for people to respond, if something useful comes out of that, then you or someone else will write into the programme officer and say exactly what's happening, and we will reflect that in the note of the meeting. Is that okay?
Right.
Okay. Well, if that's everything, then we will now close this pre-hearing meeting, although we might have another one at some point in the future. But thank you all very much for your attendance. It is, I know this is a difficult process, and you've been very patient tonight, so thank you very much. And all have a safe journey home.
Yes.